Hello and welcome everyone to the second out of 5 webinars hosted by Hong Kong as part of our Race to Zero webinar series. My name is Jasper Hilkhuizen and I'm from the Arup office in Hong Kong. While yesterday we had the general kickoff of the series, today we focus on the theme of decarbonizing the built environment. And we are thrilled to have yet again an excellent panel to share insights from various perspectives. From the registrations of both overseas and local practitioners in the built environment for this session, we can tell that there's a lot of interest in the theme, and in particular in the lessons that can be learned from Hong Kong. During this event, please feel free to post any questions and comments in the chat box, as during the second half of the session, we have time reserved for Q&A. Now, without further ado, I'll pass the virtual floor to our moderator of today, Mr. Robert Gibson, Fellow at Civic Exchange and Adjunct Professor, Division of Environment and Sustainability of the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Mr. Gibson, over to you.
Right, I have found it at last. My apologies for the delay. Well, delighted to be here today. I understand that we have over 600 people registered to listen to this webinar, of whom 73% are from Hong Kong, 18% from elsewhere in East Asia, and 9% from the rest of the world. I want to do two things very quickly. One is to introduce or set the scene in terms of the problem that we're discussing and the opportunities, and secondly, to introduce our three excellent panelists. So, the nature of the problem. So, Hong Kong and many places in the world have energy consumed in buildings forming a high percentage of their carbon footprint. Hong Kong back in 2015 set itself an energy saving plan to get a 40% reduction between 15 and 25. And its latest report from the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department was that it achieved 32% reduction by 2019. And this is a reduction in the energy intensity of the whole economy. It's not just in buildings. Moving on to today, we have just had the Hong Kong government issue its Hong Kong Climate Action Plan for 2050, with a target changing from an intensity target to an absolute reduction. And when we look at the numbers, we see, well, what did we achieve? So we achieved up to 2019, as they say, a 32% reduction in intensity, but that was for the whole economy. And also part of the reason we got the reduction was decarbonisation, or rather deindustrialisation. We have less industry in Hong Kong now than we had back in 2005. The actual change are commercial buildings increased their emissions by, or their electricity usage rather, by 22%. And overall on average, we were 21%. Going forward, the target that the government has now set ourselves is for by 2035, we should have reduced our electricity used in buildings by between 15 and 20% compared to the 2015 baseline. So we've gone up in the last 15 plus years. We've now got to go down significantly. So what did we try and do in the past, and what are we going to do in the future? Well, back in 2012, we had the Hong Kong 3030 plan, where there was an ambitious plan to actually do an absolute reduction of 30% by 2030 compared to 2005. And that was recognizing that probably Hong Kong would have 20% more buildings over that period. So it was an actual reduction in intensity within the buildings of over 50%. And the most recent major go at this was 2017, where the government, in partnership with industry, published a 4 T's plan, a plan which focused on targets, timeline, transparency, and together. So that's what we tried to do, and we see the results above. What are we going to do differently in the future to get the reductions which we need? Well, the government's plan that was issued, as I say, at the beginning of this month, has 4 elements. One is tightening regulations on things like the thermal envelopes and the appliance standards. Another one is the government taking the lead on its own buildings, going better than the minimums. A third one is introducing district cooling schemes to reduce our consumption. And the fourth one is transparency, mobilizing the community by publishing data to compare building energy informants. So that's what we're going to try and do. Now, our three panelists, we have Donald Choi, who is going to speak next, who is a very senior member of our society, both being president of the Hong Kong Institute of Architects and Urban Planners, and also being the chairman of one of our large developers, Chinachem Group. So developers specify what should be built, but are driven by what the public and what the tenants want. The next person is Tracy. So Tracy is a managing director at Standard Chartered Bank and head of their sustainable finance, and also the general secretary of the Hong Kong Green Finance Association. So what banks finance will be an important driver on decarbonising buildings, but they need trusted data on energy efficiency and embodied carbons to do this. And our third speaker, Vincent Cheng from Arup. Engineers can design for high efficiency and low embodied carbon, but they have to work at the instruction of the developers. So just to recap on the problem, we have two things. We have the energy that's consumed when buildings are in operation. So globally, that is 28% of the total carbon emissions of the world. In Hong Kong, it's 60% because we have very little agriculture and relatively little industry. On building construction, 11% of the global carbon footprint is in making the material which goes into buildings, so the cement and the steel, etc. We don't know what it is in Hong Kong. It's something which we don't measure. What can be done about these things? Well, for building operations, obviously, energy efficiency, reducing the intensity firstly, reducing the carbon intensity of the electricity we purchase, which is not a topic for this webinar. It is something for the next webinar, which Arup is running. Secondly, using less energy efficiency. So that's something we're very much talking about here. And on the building construction, using less carbon intense materials and design requiring less material. And my own personal view is the key thing that's got to be different in the future compared to the past is transparency. Without transparency, people tend to think that a building which has floor to ceiling glass is a very good building. It looks really nice, but floor to ceiling glass, even if it's high tech glass, is not as good an insulator as if you have, say, 25% glass and the rest other materials. And another example, cantilever beams. They can produce a very nice building, but they use a lot of steel. So you have high embodied carbon. So with that, I would like to hand over to Donald and ask him, as a very experienced person in these issues, to tell us what is going to happen. Thank you. I will now stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Robert. Again, I think it is my pleasure to share with all of you about my view on how private sector can actually contribute to the carbon zero exercise. And it is, as Robert mentioned, not an easy challenge for Hong Kong. I will share my screen. So all of you can see my screen now. So again, you know, as Robert mentioned, I am the president of the Hong Kong Institute of Architects as well as Hong Kong Institute of Urban Design. I also work for a large private developer in Hong Kong. So I am able to share with you viewpoint, not only from the consultant's point of view, but also from the client's point of view, and hope that we can further kind of devise practical solution that could assist us in how we tackle the climate action problem. Now, I think all of us know Hong Kong is one of the world's most densely populated cities. Again, building-related activities account for some 90% of Hong Kong total electricity consumption. That is compared to a global average of 40%. So it is very important, for us to really look at green building and how we can, through our effort, from the purchase of material to construction to operations, and finally, if there any possibility of building less, because I think building less is one actually solution that we shouldn't forget. Again, it is not an easy challenge for Hong Kong. Hong Kong, as people notice, as also mentioned by Robert, we do not actually measure the embedded carbon in our construction material. We do not have a very established, transparent system yet. So what we are measuring right now is basically the operational emissions. This is something that I think in the coming years, we need to revise and amend so that we have a more transparent picture of how we will actually be using energy in our building and control the emissions. And green building, obviously, there are many ways to control the construction process. So for our group, I think we have actually, in line with Hong Kong kind of climate action plan, develop our own carbon reduction target. So in 2019, we have already established strategic roadmaps and sustainability plan, which we aim to achieve 38% of carbon emissions reduction in 2030 as compared with 2015. And we further actually has committed to setting science-based target in 2021 at the beginning of this year, and reviewing and revamping our earlier 3038 target to support the long-term viability of the business. We have actually, in June this year, announced a new roadmap, the CGG 3050 Plus, actually elevating, the carbon emission saving reduction target to 52.8% in 2030 as compared with the base year of 2020. Now, through all this exercise, we have developed some practical steps that we should take, including establishing a sustainable procurement guideline to implement the sustainable and low carbon designs on products and services. All our new development projects, we have committed to achieve BEAM plus Gold rating. This is the Hong Kong kind of environmental rating system. So, in all our buildings and projects, we have made sure that we will achieve measurable and transparent target and standard. And we further aim to achieve at least a 12% saving against the local building energy code. So it is not just code compliance. We want to do better than code compliance. We have introduced some new technologies, including the replacement or substitute of the diesel generator used at site normally in Hong Kong. And we will further develop other steps to enhance our kind of carbon assessment tools and measurements. We are one of the first real estate developers in Hong Kong to make use of the battery-based generator, as I mentioned, to replace the traditional diesel generators in our site. We are proceeding and exploring and actually implementing the use of modular integrated construction methodology in our development. Our residential development in one of the urban sites in Hong Kong is going to use MIC. Obviously, we see there is opportunities to actually extending this methodology to other development and saving on the carbon emissions and improving the construction safety. And, again, digitization is always in our mind. But, for innovations and the adoption of new technologies, it is not just actually any single individual stakeholder could control and, be responsible. We need the whole ecosystem to come together. Hong Kong, right at this moment, we do not have a lot of manufacturing facilities. So, the carbon saving, for example, in the embedded carbon in the materials, we need to work with factories, in mainland to ensure those targets are being met. And obviously, it will improve the involvement of IoT and other kind of digitalized inspection system as well. So we can actually minimize the traveling. Again, as I mentioned, it is about the whole ecosystem. So we are teaming up with the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park to launch a range of various initiatives that will encourage the adoption of smart city solutions, also working towards a low carbon emission target. We are supporting startups and actually exploring the various accelerator program for property technology, especially on carbon reduction. So in conclusion, I think to improve the sustainability of buildings, it's not just about saving costs from the developer point of view, but really, as Robert mentioned earlier, to satisfy our market needs. Eventually, I think if the market places priority and importance on the needs of energy efficient green building and reduction of carbon emission, then developer and the design will actually follow the market demands. And obviously, developers has a major role to play in ensure that we create and construct a sustainable community for not only our generations, but for all future generations. Thank you.
So Donald, thank you very much. I'd now like to ask for Tracy to talk about the story from the finance point of view. What to get something built, you need the money, and very often with a large building, you need to have a loan from a bank. So what information do banks need in order to be able to see which are the more sustainable buildings, the ones which are lower carbon, and to finance those ones? So Tracy, you have two hats. One is as the head of sustainable finance for Standard Chartered, and the other one is Deputy Secretary General for the Green Finance Association. Please tell us your viewpoint.
Thank you, Robert, and good day, everyone. Delighted to be sharing the green building topics, which is close to my heart, and even better, sharing the panel with friends here. And thank you for Arup for inviting me to speak at this panel. So I think, Robert, there's a couple of questions there. So let me answer step by step. So first of all, I want to say that the green building market presents a 24.7 trillion opportunity according to the World Bank. And 18 trillion is required in Asia alone by 2030 for us to Paris Agreement aligned. And as a bank, a key role is to channel capital to fill this large funding gap. So green building certification is one of the most common tools to apply to building in order to qualify green finance. And there are a number of green building certifications being developed locally and a number of them being adopted internationally, like LEED and IFC Edge, etc. And in Hong Kong, over a third of the total green bond proceeds are from green buildings. And in the Greater Bay Area, the number is even bigger at 44%. So how are these green building certifications facilitate the decarbonizations of the built sector? So I also led one of the projects, green building projects, which is a collaboration between the Greater Bay Area Green Finance Alliance and the Hong Kong 2050 is now. And we have published a couple of reports. The first one to really address these questions, to look at, to benchmark 8 different green building rating systems that's been widely used in across the world. And the second one was looking at policy recommendations for Hong Kong, which is done by Arup. I'm sure Vincent will share a lot more later. So let me share some findings from the benchmarking report. Oh, by the way, we are working on the 3rd editions on the green building project. So do watch out for this space. So going back to sharing the findings. With really the benchmarking is with decarbonization in mind. And to compare the green building certification to see which one is actually can sufficiently demonstrate how building actually go through the decarbonization. And the findings, we have found that the performance-based system, which is Edge and Neighbors, as opposed to the credit scoring system, are more efficient in measuring energy efficiency. And also, only Edge offer a clear pathway to net zero. So what is IFC Edge? It's a tool developed by the World Bank IFC, and it looked at 3 things, very simple things. So Robert mentioned energy efficiency. I think Donald mentions embodied carbon, and also this certification also look at water efficiency. So 3 very simple things. And it has 3 levels. So the first certification itself will require a 20% efficiency across the 3 elements. The next level is 40%. And then when I also mentioned the net zero pathway, the final zero carbon certification is for when you maximize the opportunity for energy efficiency improvement, and then you allow for use carbon offset to achieve and arrive to the net zero marks. So looking at this, the benefit of this Edge green building certification, we also see that a lot of green building certification can only be applied or only being used on new building, which I think Donald also mentioned earlier that, you know, how do we not do more, and how do we actually repurpose and look at the existing building stock, so retrofit. So for that, this certification can also be applied for existing building and across different kind of building structure. So it can be a home, can be a hospital, can be retail, offices, school, etc. So it is very diverse that you can use on across a different different building structure per se. So we really see that coming out from the benchmarking report, this is a sort of one of the better in terms of demonstrating decarbonization, and also can be used widely to scale up across the building sector stock. So on the back of this, so how as a bank that we help to try to scale this up? So we have recently signed an MOU with the IFC certification technical support team to provide our clients the technical support required to go through this green building certification, because we really want to help our clients to decarbonize their building sector. And we also gone into a transactions providing a green financing first in Hong Kong using EDGE certification on a green acquisition on an existing industrial building where the clients committed to green retrofit the building and then using EDGE certification to qualify for green financing. So so this is how we help the clients to go through the technical side and also as a bank provide the financing side when the client can achieve demonstrate this standard. So changing gear a little bit on looking wider about financial products and the green and sustainable finance product evolutions, I would say. So you are very familiar with the bonds and loans you heard a lot from the market, which is what I mentioned about use of proceed-based leveraging the green building certification that I mentioned, a number of them. Now, recently, we have seen a very fast growth of sustainability-linked products. So this is a product that is, it can be long, can be bond, and can be wider. But let me share a little bit backgrounds about the market volume so far. So at the backdrop of the whole of sustainable finance debt market booming this year, so by mid-year, we're already over the whole of 2020 market volume. And in particular, the sustainability-linked loan in Asia is already double from last year. And as I mentioned, this sustainability-linked structure can be applied not just on loans, but it can be on bonds and it can be on different financial products, including derivative or supply chain or even SME financing, sustainable financing. And why, and I have to, so why this sustainability-linked structure is one of my favorite is because it helps the issuer or the borrower to articulate their sustainability goal and a more transparent tool for checking the companies are moving towards net zero. A couple of key features about this particular product is the sustainability-linked financing margin is tied to the performance of the borrower with the incentive and penalty. So if the borrower can achieve X amount of carbon emission reduction by year 1, 2, 3, and each year there's a check on the checking day to say, okay, if you achieve that as we pre-agree on this target, then we give you a financing incentive. And on the other side, if you don't, then it could be a penalty associated to it. Now, just also call out the differences between the European market and Asia market in the sustainability-linked loan product. So I mentioned the structure, the margins tied to both incentive and penalty, and that is a typical European market structure. However, in Asia, majority of the SLL, the sustainability-linked loans so far we've seen is one-sided, I mean incentive only. So we are still going through the journey on this. And also another reason why sustainability-linked product structure is being so fastly grow in the past 2-3 years, because it can also apply on working capital. So unlike the use of proceed based on the underlying asset or project, it can tie to the company's itself target, sustainability target. And that's why it widened out from use of proceed to working capital using the sustainability-linked structure. And sharing a bit more about why the product scope, sustainable trade. So Donald also mentioned about embodied carbon construction companies. You know, how do we look at the trade finance using sustainable trade to financing construction company, building materials, equipment, etc. The entertainment is a very good one that is growing very fast. It's I wouldn't say a startup now, but entertainer, the replacement of diesel engine on site when the building is being built, and it reduces the carbon emissions largely on site. So it's a really good product. And again, this is something that we can tie to and set a particular target when the building is being at construction to tie to this sustainability lane structure and product and financing. Also, I also mentioned ESG derivative, helping company on hedging side, needing, and we have seen this being done on developers, property developers as well. Last but not least, I want to mention, so far we talk a lot about the product that is capital market driven, top of that, like large items, bonds and large loans, and we talk about onto sustainable trade, which is SME markets, right? But then retail product, green mortgage. So this is another important product that to drive not just the developer can use and articulate on this building, but like you and I should have a choice to choose which building that is green, and I enjoy my mortgage to be green. So again, green mortgage is another product. I'm very proud that we just launched it last Friday. So in Hong Kong now, we have green mortgage that can be applied to new, old, and government housing building. So please do look out for this new product in the market. I say last but not least on, oh, sorry, Robert, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, I thought you had just finished. Sorry, Tracy, carry on, please.
Not quite. I haven't gone to my second part, but I'll be very fast, almost there. So I want to also quickly mention about the carbon credit, the role of carbon credit as well. So the IFC-H zero carbon certification, I mentioned that it's allowed for carbon offset. We will probably need another sessions and series to go through the carbon market, but I just want to highlight that, I believe a high integrity voluntary carbon market is essential to facilitate for our race to net zero goal. With that, I just leave you with 5-letter TSVCM for you to look out for this voluntary market consortium in this development. So very quickly, thank you for the slide that Robert prepared, and thank you so much. So I guess the second part, very quickly, I want to answer Robert's questions is, what does the finance sector need from the developer and from engineer, etc. on this, right? I want to articulate a few. So I mentioned from use of proceeds based, the green building certifications being widely used. And some banks set minimum standards. Even hearing from Donald themselves, they are setting themselves to achieve go and above for the local green building certification BIM standard. So as financial institution, we also set minimum standard on these suites of green building certification per se. And then and also we use SPO, second party opinion. And in fact, in Hong Kong, 98% of all the green debt had second party opinion already. Lastly, going back to the sustainability link loan slide. So Robert very kindly pulled that out. So here I just want to call out that, on your item number 2 with setting targets. So I call out setting the SPT. The target setting, it has to be ambitious and measurable. And then and also it has reporting associated to it, because after you set the target every year, you will need to submit a report in order to for the lender to check that you actually achieve or you fail your target. And on those data being submitted in the report, according to the latest update from the Loan Association, it requires external party to verify. So very typically, a CSR report, it needs to be like if your data, GHG, for example, carbon emission data is being collected from a CSR report, that report itself needs to be externally verified. And it has to, the verifier has to call out that actually they validate that number, GHG, in order for us to say, okay. And that is the latest update from the Loan Association. So with that, I know that I probably run out of time a little bit, but I just leave you with this. From the blue sky picture, a lot of this external verification, it involves cost and time. So if we have data publicly available, then it could potentially reduce a lot of cost and time and make the market go even faster. So with that, I'll pass it back to Robert. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd now like to invite our third speaker, Vincent Cheng, who is a senior member of Arup's management and has been working on sustainable buildings or making buildings more sustainable for many years. As we said at the beginning, it is the developers say what they want and the banks agree to finance it, but it's the engineers that actually make the buildings happen. So Vincent, what are you going to be doing to make our buildings more energy efficient and reduce their embodied carbon? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robert, for your introductions. Good afternoon for those who are from Hong Kong, and good morning or good evening, depending what you are. It's really kind of a pleasure for me here to share the perspective from a consultant. We're engineering consultant, but these days that we work beyond, purely engineering kind of scope. We actually help our clients to decarbonize and find a way, and to some extent, the entire society to decarbonize our entire societies. So I think Donald actually have shared part of this information that in Hong Kong that the context is looking like this. That we have over 60% of carbon actually emitting from buildings. So buildings does matter. So if we can decarbonize and make all the building net zero, then we effectively resolve a lot of problems. That's why I mean globally that although that many kind of economies like Hong Kong or country like China's or UK, they make this commitment, but I would say building is by far the most difficult kind of sectors to decarbonize. There are many reasons, that at least some actually. Firstly, it's actually involved many stages. That we heard yesterday that from HKGFA chairman Zheng Haowei say that I mean that existing building probably by far is the most challenging kind of areas that we have to tackle. Not only existing building, even the new buildings that if we want to go through that net zero or advancing net zero food part by 2030, that arriving that net zero kind of objective is also very challenging. So you can see the kind of problem actually from many fronts. And more importantly, it's multifaceted. What we just mentioned, it's not only about technical or construction, it's all about investment and also on how we actually manage and also coordinating ourselves to work on that. And in terms of coordination, that I think we know that in this building or construction sector that involve a lot of stakeholders that we have to coordinate, aligned that so that we can work in the same directions. But I think the last, certainly not the least, is definitely a problem that we have a different way of reporting. What Tracy mentioned, that we have worldwide different schemes that actually help people to measures. But more importantly, that even between the scheme, they are not communicable. And more importantly, different stakeholders using different schemes. Say ESG people use their kind of reporting methods, very different from what engineers when they use when they design and also contract on that. So these actually create a lot of say challenge, or if not kind of a roadblock for people to move to that net zero directions. But we all know that decarbonization work is not new. That worldwide, ever since we released that Silent Spring kind of reports, we have make a lot of effort globally to arrive at, and recently Kyoto Protocol and also the Paris Agreement have actually helped align governments at a high level to arrive that end, and actually also help the industry to align ourselves. So look, and within Arup, we try where we could, to help to influence and also, working along with this very high level kind of objective or targets, and cascade down and translate that into something, workable, doable, and more importantly, that understandable, articulable, for most of the stakeholder I mentioned, and so that we can, have a concerted efforts work together in that direction. So in the past few years, we have developed our own assessment skill called SPEAR to assess the sustainabilities of projects, including carbon emissions, and we have issues that drive for change, series of publications to educate the society at large on how we can work together on that. And I think most recently that we actually make our own commitments that will become a net zero corporations by year 2030s. But I think more importantly that the world is looking for what we call post COVID's kind of paradigm shift. This is what we are looking for. I mean that of course that we have to look from perspective of developments. I mean that Donald just present his perspective, and also from financial sector how we can work with help from the business sector, and in particular the financial sector, to provide the kind of enablements. So I think these are the kind of things that we like to work to get us. But coming to ourselves, how consultants in general can help. When these triangular can tell one thing. First, that we could only ourselves actually do our best. We walked our talk. We could only resolve a very small, tiny part of the problems, and we need to influence. We need to work together with stakeholders, including our partners, developers, and more importantly today that investors are becoming more and more important to help to drive things move faster. I think more important is it's something that everybody is looking forward, is this kind of transformations of our practice. We heard a lot, that Robert at his introduction part on the robots and what are the blockers within the industry that prevent us to practicing zero carbon. I think this is the part, Arup is where we could work with the partners to help to align to arrive at. When we say change the practice, it's very complicated. It's not one practice. It's actually a lot of practices in the industry. It's shown here that life cycle-wise for buildings that you have the planning stage where the financial the planner will come into place to tell you how much or what you need to invest, and then you have the next design stage, which is even more complicated. We have a lot of designer that need to work together with the help, of course, the green buildings certifications or other guidelines to help to design it in the most efficient way. And then come to the construction is even more difficult because we know that the construction sector is actually moving very slow in terms of changing their practices, let alone what Robert and also that previously mentioned about using the embodied carbon to track our carbon emissions. So these actually already complicate a lot on the overall kind of our carbon story. The final part definitely is even more difficult is the operating parts. We know that for typical office building or commercial buildings that life cycle wise, the operation energy account for over 70%. So you have to work with a lot of people, the FM and also even the tenants and also the individual kind of user. They need to work together and they need to find a way how to make to spend less, and then how can work together to make the building more efficient. So overall, that I can summarize what we are working on this kind of process in four separate kind of work or tasks for consulting. Firstly, we have to work as what Donald mentioned earlier, is that we have to work with partners to develop the roadmap, and more importantly, we have to develop a kind of achievable kind of targets for individual kind of corporations. And then from there, we have to work with the team to design and to retrofit the kind of existing buildings so that it can be operate, and achieve, hopefully, the zero as soon as possible. The third, I think, is also very important that Tracy mentioned about the credibilities of reporting, and also validations of the reports. I think that's again, I think it's also very important where we use technology now they can provide to help to track what we call life cycle kind of emissions on that. So I'll come to that shortly on the details. And finally, that definitely is very important that we need to help to work together to structure a kind of credible, accountable kind of ESG reporting, which I think the market is after urgently, imminently, and that's. So quickly on the design that, as I said, Arup have been working on this area for over 70 years. We are now at 75th kind of anniversary. In past 75 years, we work a lot on the green buildings, and we have amassed a lot of the kind of a way to design be it passively or active kind of system to reduce the energy consumption and also optimize the design on structure and others to reduce the use of energy. And more importantly, these things apply the we call circular economy kind of concept to make the building, if possible, that becomes circular. So these are some things that is doable, achievable. But what I think is a challenge for us in the next few years, if not decades, is to make everything regenerative. I know we know that the built environment is built already. I mean, we have to help the nature to recover. I mean, how we can apply nature-based kind of design concept, and then more importantly, become sustainable and more kind of a livable kind of a built environment are something that not only energy, I mean, the professional looking for, but more importantly, widely, the design community is looking for a kind of generative integrated solution on that. On the tracking part, and that it's not new again. That in the past, I would say 30 years or so, that we have used a computer to calculate or to at least estimate the kind of energies that can be used when building still under the design. And likewise in construction, these few years that the life cycle assessment is becoming popular. But if you look at this diagrams, that they work in very silo kind of way. I mean, I can tell you that based on my 25 years of experience in this well, I mean, the design team seldom actually pass on the kind of carbon data to the construction team, and likewise the construction team probably effectively have not collect any kind of carbons data while they build they construct the buildings. So I mean that when you get to the operating teams, they're struggling. I mean, I don't have a target because nobody tell me what or how much I should achieving. So the only target they could have is to get zero. But I think we have to be pragmatic. I mean that's why on that and towards the later at the end of this cycle, when the ESG specialist has to report the kind of carbon emissions, they find it very difficult to document the whole things. I mean, not only one particular building, but more on portfolios. So that's why this few years, I think, starting from 2010, within the firm, we have developing this what we call whole life cycle carbon tracking platform. It means to bring everybody, in one kind of platform so that they can communicate, to understand and what means by, for example, EUI, energy user intensity. What exactly does that means? How will that actually affect my kind of overall carbon emissions? So this kind of a platform actually help a lot. First, to have kind of common way of communications. Secondly, that with the help of course, digital means, we can share information, easily, and that for in particular for big developer like Donald's at Chinachem, that they have a portfolio of the assets, some actually under construction, some in operation. So if they want,
Vincent, sorry. With apologies, we've only got 9 minutes left for the whole webinar. Sorry. If you could finish relatively quickly, I apologize for cutting you short.
Sure. No, that's I promise this last slide. So That's why we use technology, as I said, to make this happen. So that hopefully can bring everybody in the same page, and we can work together and discuss and work out the solutions. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you very much indeed. So what I'd like to do now is to ask Donald and Vincent one question for a relatively quick answer each, and then I'd like to let Tracy have the final word. One of the key areas we're talking about is reducing building and operating energy consumption or electricity consumption. In some parts of the world, they have regular sort of annual measurements of how buildings are doing and put that information into the public domain, which leads to people paying a lot more attention to operating the buildings efficiently. Is that something that you think can come in Hong Kong, and what would make us more likely to get that and to, operate our buildings better?
Maybe I will, try to share my view first. I think it's something that we need to educate the community in Hong Kong. And again, I think it is a very good way to set up constructive competition between different landlords and developers. But again, as I mentioned earlier, market is powerful. So if the community and society, through their change of values and demand, they actually could exert a lot of influence on how, for example, shopping malls are being operated with their AC. A lot of shopping mall in Hong Kong, I think the air conditioning is really set at a very, very low temperature. People in summertime bring jacket into indoor because the air condition is very cold. So, again, I think, it is possible, and it is good to be transparent in how we use energy in our operating costs. And, then it gives transparent data for the public to demand further improvement.
Thank you very much. And Vincent, the question for you on embodied carbon, because you put up those the slide showing life cycle analysis. Now, back in 2018, the city of Vancouver decided to require a life cycle analysis to be done and published before giving building permits. One idea that we've debated here is whether for Hong Kong, before the occupation permit of a building is issued, there should be a life cycle analysis filed with the Buildings Department and put on into the public domain, put on the Buildings Department website. We do it already with the BEAM Plus certification. Should we do it with the life cycle analysis? And there would be a lot of incentives on people to get the life cycle analysis done in time, so you do not delay occupation permit. Now, I appreciate that making things tough like this is not something that I would vote for if I was in charge of a developer, or if I was the engineering consultant required to produce the life cycle analysis on time, because it makes things tough. But we've got to change. We've got to start reducing our carbon in buildings substantially. And if things don't get tough, we probably will not change fast enough. So what are your views on that?
Okay, I'd like to answer that from two perspectives. First is the readiness. Certainly that we know that in the market, in Hong Kong in particular, that we actually have developed kind of a life cycle impact kind of a database. So we can use that database to do what we call credible kind of assessments. So I mean, I would say in terms of readiness, we are ready, and that and you probably know that CIC and also EMSD, they have this kind of software that can enable the practitioner to carry a kind of a genuine kind of credible kind of assessment. So I think that's no question about that. The second thing is on the effectiveness. I mean, whether these kind of assessment really help to change things. That I think is areas that we have to discuss for that. For Hong Kong, we know that effectively all our construction materials are import. So if we want to change you have to look from very fundamental kind of concept. So we have to change the mindset. So even we have carried out this kind of I would say assessment that the kind of option that we can change quite limited if you only limit on the selection of materials. So you want this kind of exercise to be useful. We have to change the mindset of the practitioner that they need to look from a more holistic way. Whether they should build it or not, whether they should build it in this form or not, or whether they should build using this way or not. And that is the only ways that we can instigate the change. The assessment is simple, but how we can change the mindset of the people to use it on addressing this effectiveness is kind of a big challenge.
Thank you very much. And that leads in nicely to Tracy. Could you say the final word on this? Because it's the information that comes out of measuring building performance and measuring embodied carbon that will be data for you deciding who you lend money to in the future.
Yeah, so you already fit it into my mouth. So the data, quantifiable, measurable data, in order for us to have a very clear, transparent decarbonization pathway of, may that be converting all our existing building stock to low carbon, and then use of carbon credit to fast track this process to arrive at net zero. And we also want every new building to be green, built in a green way. Last but not least, I think the life cycle analysis, let's start having that data transparency of understanding the full life cycle analysis of the built environment. So I stop here.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to hand back to the MC.
All right, many thanks to all four speakers for sharing their valuable insights. It is great to see how, despite your different backgrounds, you all align for a common goal. And one of the main takeaways to me is that we all have a role to play in combating climate change, no matter which industry we represent. And thanks also to you, dear audience, for joining. Please be reminded that the next session that is hosted by the Hong Kong office as part of the Race to Zero webinar series will be tomorrow from 4 to 5 p.m. Hong Kong time. During this session, we'll go into more depth on the theme of Towards Clean Energy. So similar as today, we have an excellent panel of experts. So if you haven't registered yet, please do so through the event webpage. Hope to see you tomorrow, and bye for now. Thank you.